Welcome to this week's Bible study. We are taking a sidestep away from the study of God's character. Next week we'll come back to it, but I thought we'd do something a little different. And the material that we're going to be looking at is something that I'm working on for the Salvation Army has a Spanish radio devotional program / podcast. You can hear it on the radio in some countries. You can also find it online. And I'm working on some Spanish devotions for the new year. And I really just kind of got caught up with this particular one and decided that because these devotions they can only be like 8 to 11 minutes long, and I don't know how long this is going to be. It could be 8 to 11 minutes long, but there's so much more material than what I can share in it. So I thought, I've got all of this information, and I felt led to choose this particular one to do this study on. So let's just dive into it. I've entitled it, the series comes from, the title of the series comes from a chorus that I grew up singing, and it translates literally to your joy without measure. Oh, his joy without measure he gives me. And the title of this particular, that's for the series. There's 9 devotions in the series. This particular one is under the category Waiting on God. And the title of this particular one is God's Plans. God's Plans. And when I say God's plans, that probably makes you think of a specific verse. And my series is on very well-known verses, which is why, but looking at them more deeply and getting the full extent of, and understanding the full extent. This one is, of course, based on Jeremiah 29:11. And let me read you that from the NIV. I happen to have NIV at home. I didn't print out the New Living Translation, and I don't think I've unpacked a New Living Translation yet here. So let's listen to the very famous Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. This is such a well-known verse, such a popular verse. In fact, I was just watching this weekend the Welcome of Cadets, which is our seminary students. If you're not in the Salvation Army, I'm trying to translate terminology. And each one had a favorite verse. And one of them mentioned this one as his favorite verse. And I knew I was working on it to present for this week. So, yeah, 29:11. But there's so much going on in this chapter that just that one verse taken out of context, you miss out on the richness and the depth of what God is actually saying here. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at this chapter. We're not going to read it all. We're only going to read probably 4 through 13, the verses that we're going to actually read. But there's so much going on. So first of all, let's figure out what are the circumstances, what's going on around them, who's part of this story. Historically, you might know. Some of you might know, some of you might not know too much about the Bible, and you're wanting to learn, and this is wonderful. And some of you will go, I knew that, I knew that. But what's going on here is the nation of Israel has basically messed up so much throughout all of the book of Judges and First, Second Samuel, First, Second Kings, First, Second Chronicles, all of those where you have judges, you have kings, and the nation of Israel flip-flops on God constantly. One generation worships God, the next one doesn't, and they just do that constantly for hundreds of years, for actually approximately 490 years. Almost 500 years they're doing this, and finally God needs them to learn their lesson. They need to learn to completely and only put their trust in God and none of these other false gods. And so he allows something drastic to happen. He allows the Babylonian Empire to take them captive, to overtake the nation of Israel. And at that time, it was the kingdom of Judah. The kingdom of Israel is already gone. They were taken captive by the Assyrians and scattered, and no one knows where they ended up. But in the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, they were taken captive. The country was taken captive, and to kind of hold on to the control, they took prisoners back to Babylon, to the capital of their empire, and they didn't disperse them all over their empire. They were basically taken to Babylon, and the first group that went was made up of, well, first of all, the king is dead, and so his son, the crowned prince, the new king, he and his mother, the king's mother, I can't remember the verbiage there right now. I can't think of it. Anyway, they're taken, as are everyone in the palace, any of the nobles, any of those who are there, all the princes of the nation, of the kingdom. Architects and engineers are taken, and we know from the book of Daniel, we know the names of another 4 that were taken, which were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. You might better know that the last 3 as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're Babylonian names, but their Hebrew names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and Daniel. And they were part of this first group. That's why we're pretty sure that Daniel, excuse me, my nose tickles. We know Daniel was a nobleman or a prince or a they were very well educated. Maybe they were architects, maybe they're engineers, maybe they were just, there was potential in them, and so they were chosen to serve in the royal palace of the Babylonian emperor. King. So anyway, so all of these very high placed people, very useful people, are taken captive in this first the old version of Trail of Tears, I guess. It's just they were taken captive to Babylon, and they've arrived there, and they're just, the majority, they're praying, they're asking God, it's like, save us, get us back home, and they don't, and they're just, this is their hope, this is their dreams. It's like their whole lives are completely messed up, and amongst them come false prophets that are going around, people that are going around saying, God has told me not to get too comfortable here because he's going to save us. He's going to come and get us out of here, and we'll be home soon. And don't worry about that. So they were going to these, they were putting their trust in these false prophets. And so God gives Jeremiah a message that, because he is a true prophet, And he tells Jeremiah, you need to set them straight. Tell them what I'm telling you is going on. And that's what chapter 29 is about. Chapter 29 is really two letters, a long letter to the captive Israelites and a short letter to one of these false prophets who has really been trying to get back at Jeremiah and trying to cause Jeremiah danger to death. But it's like, and we're not going to really worry about that letter. We're going to look at what God has to tell the nation of Israel, those that are captive already. In history, we know that the Babylonians took 3 different groups of captives. This letter is probably just after the first group. Now, they might have been there for a couple of years already, don't know. But there were 10 years between the first and the second group of captives, and then another 5 years between the second and the third group of captives. So, it's probable that we're nipping it at the bud, nipping it at the bud, early on in their captivity. So, with all that known, we need to read some of the scripture. So let's look at verses 4 through 7. 4 through 7, Jeremiah 29, 4 through 7. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Okay, I'll say this one thing. In English, it says, seek peace and prosperity to the city. In Spanish, it's, let me look at it specifically. The bienestar, looking for the goodwill, the good for the city. So, peace and prosperity. Okay. But did you notice there that 2 times God says, those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. And later on he says, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. So God is taking ownership on this. He's saying, excuse me, but I'm not going to rescue you from there because I'm the one who put you there. This is on purpose. You are there on purpose. And, it's kind of like a slap in the face at the beginning. It's kind of like, wait a minute. God brought us, we're here. God did this to us? How dare God do this to us? I mean, that would be your and my reaction. Is like, wait a minute. I've been taken prisoner to a foreign land, and God is telling me that he did it. It wasn't the enemy, but actually he did it on purpose. It's like, obviously he doesn't love us. He doesn't care about us. But then he softens it a little with he tells them, really, y'all need to just get with it. Just relax. You need to just decide to really have the best life you can where you are at. He says, build houses, plant gardens, eat the fruit of it. So now it's like, you don't build a house really quickly. And if you plant something in a garden and you eat it, that's going to be months later. And then he says, get married and have sons and daughters. So now you're talking, plural. So we're talking several years now. But then he says, to marry off their sons and daughters. So now we're talking, 20 years later, and then it says so that they can have sons and daughters. And it's like, wait a minute. We're talking not a few weeks, not a few months, not even a few years. What's going on? But there's something else there. If you're taken captive and you are a prisoner, the Babylonians were pretty good in that. I mean, they didn't take them prisoner to torture them and to make them slaves as much as make them useful. Babylon was known for wanting to create a healthy, powerful empire, and to do that, you wanted the best of the best to do what they do best, because then your empire is stronger. And so the Jews who have been taken captive, they might be thinking, Assyrians were horrible. Assyrians were evil. Assyrians, what they did to captives was horrible, and the fact that they completely separated them and put them to the far ends of their empire and never to be heard from again. Totally different. But this might be what's in the back of their minds going, but if we're going to be but God is telling them, you're going to be here for a while. You don't need to be afraid that they're going to be killing you soon. You don't need to worry about those things. You're going to actually be able to build a house and to plant a garden and to get married and to have children and have them get married and you have grandchildren. You have a future here. That's caveat. Here. You have a future, but it's here. It's not in Jerusalem. Just forget Jerusalem. And so this is a two-edged sword, a sharp edge and a flatter edge. It's kind of like, you're not going back to Jerusalem, but you're also not going to die. You're actually going to be able to live your life. And as you're living your life in this pagan country, you're going to be able to make a life for yourself here. Just embrace it and get the most out of it. Enjoy what you can from it. And like I said, it's like, pray for the good will, the prosperity, the peace of this place where I've sent you. What's that for us? Pray for wherever it is that we are. Pray for peace and prosperity. Because if there's peace and prosperity in the city, in the country where we're at, then we have a chance for peace and prosperity. And so this is all of this going on. And God he's like, do you want the good news or the bad news first? And he says, okay, bad news, you're going to be here for a while. Good news is you're going to be here for a while. You're going to live and you're going to have an almost normal life. And it's like, it's not going to be all bad. Now we're going to continue with reading verses 10 and 11. Okay? The one before and the very well-known verse. Okay? This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. Jeremiah is writing from Jerusalem, remember. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And there's the nutshell. He's here like, first of all, again, good news, bad news. It's going to be 70 years. But at the end of 70 years, I will come and I will get you back. Now, bad news, you will probably not see it. but your children and your grandchildren will. And your lineage will continue, and your family will continue, and Israel will continue. So it's kind of like, this is the good news, bad news. And then, of course, the very well-known verse is like, okay, 70 years, I won't take you, and I'll take you all back. He's talking to the nation of Israel. I will take the nation of Israel back to Jerusalem from Babylon. Because I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. So here he's saying, I know this isn't the life you had planned out for yourself. This isn't the life that everyone expected for the nation of Israel. But I have a better ultimate plan. The ultimate plan was having a nation that when they returned from captivity in Babylon, as a nation, they never turned their back on God, Jehovah. They didn't pay attention, most didn't pay attention to Jesus, but they have never, to this day, as a nation, the only God that they serve is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They learned there, and God's plan was that for them to solidify their faith and only having God on their side. The other gods, the Babylonian gods, were for Babylon. And here they are captive, far from home, and the only God that's on their side is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So God is letting them know, I have a better future planned for the nation of Israel and for mankind, because he needed Israel to be steadfast in God for Jesus to come. He needed Israel to worship him and to allow Jesus to come in the form of a baby and to grow up in a culture that worshiped God. And so this is God's plan, so much more than what we imagine. But I don't want to end there. We need to keep on going, because the next two verses speak to me more than anything. Verses 12 and 13. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. He is telling the future. He's looking at a nation that is wishy-washy when it comes to worshiping God. It's like how they worship him sometimes and not all the time, and he's saying, look, after these 70 years, you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. When I am the only God for you, you're going to find me. And I think for me, that verse 13, is my favorite out of this chapter. 11 is wonderful, and 12 is a continuation, a bridge. But 13 is something that I can hold on to strongly now, today. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. With all your heart. He needs to be the center of your focus. That is what God is telling you. He says, I have plans for you. It's like, they are so much more than you could ever imagine and plan for yourself. Allow me this. And you will find me whenever you need me, any moment, every day, every moment, you'll find me if you look for me with all your heart, if I am the center of your life. If I am not the center of your life, then you're going to be flip-flopping all over the place and wonder where I am. But if you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. In fact, the first line of verse 14 is, I will be found by you. It's God is telling us, look, I need to be the center of your heart, of your life. I need to be the one that you depend on fully. Not even money, not even family, not even a job, not even, it's like, no. You need to focus and trust completely in me, in God. You will seek him and you will find him when you seek him with all your heart. So again, those 3 verses. So now, from now on, every time you hear Jeremiah 29:11, I want you to also continue the thought. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me. When you seek me with all your heart, I will be found by you. So what's this chapter telling us? God has a plan for each one of us. And it very well may be different than what your plan is. I'm doing a online Pampered Chef party this week. And one of the questions in the party was, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a girl? What would you be now if you were what you thought you wanted to be when you were a girl, a little kid, girl, boy? And my answer was teacher or flight attendant. And yeah, here I am. It's very different teaching. I was studying to be a teacher when God called me to become a minister, and one of my excuses was the world needs Christian teachers, and God was like, yeah, I don't care. This is what I have planned for you. Plans to prosper you and to give you hope and a future. And he has. I'm telling you, when you put your life completely in his hands, he will do incredible things that you could never imagine before. And it could take years. I went into seminary 31 and a half years ago. Yeah, or 31 years ago. 32 years ago. Something like that. 31 years ago. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so also in this chapter, we see that no matter where we are, there is always hope in God. Even when we find ourselves in the middle of a situation that we might have put ourselves in, or we might not have had anything to do with putting ourselves in this situation, God is there. It might not be his plan for you yet. His plan might be for your future yet. But wherever you happen to be, good, bad, or indifferent, he's there. You just might not be seeing him. You need to look for him, seek him with all your heart, and you'll find him. And then also he reminds us that we need to pray for wherever it is that we find ourselves. Pray for the city, pray for the family you're in. You might not be in what you would consider a great family. Pray for your family. Pray for the city. Pray for your state. Pray for your country. Because if there's peace and prosperity there, then you will have more peace and prosperity. And prosperity doesn't necessarily mean money. And again, if you need help, if you need more of what God has, what he can do for you, if you just need to search completely with all your heart. Search him out. Ask him. And he says, he promises, if you do that, you will find him. You will find him if you seek him with all your heart, if you give yourself completely to him. Complete confidence in him. With him, you'll find the hope that God has for you. Hear that again. With God, you'll find the hope that he has for you. Without him, where's the hope? And that is our study around the verse Jeremiah 29:11. But now, from now on, you'll always hear 29:11, 12, and 13 in your mind. God bless you. And next week, we go back to one of God's characteristics, is part of his character. I've already started working on it, so I know what it is, and I'm not going to tell you yet. You'll have to wait till next week. And God bless you, and I'll see you then soon. Bye.